should speak only positively from the pulpit and shouldn't concentrate on negative things. Rarely does someone leave the Catholic Church for evangelicalism, fundamentalism, or a pseudo-Christian sect out of base motives. Almost always, the impulse comes from a genuine, if somewhat misdirected love for Christ. Often it follows a true conversion, not a mere emotional paroxysm, but a real appreciation, for the first time, of the essential truth of Christianity. There is usually a genuine sense of the absolute necessity of acting on the truth, coupled with a sincere sorrow for sin. Why do so many who, as Catholics, begin to develop a real appreciation for Christianity? And this is something every Catholic needs to do and redo. The faith of a child being insufficient for an adult, end up leaving the church. Why do they today? Finally, realize that Christianity must be taken seriously. But tomorrow sign up at the Bible Church down the street. Often it's because the Christ there showed up their parish as a wimp. There's no politer way to say it. If they are told about the life of Jesus, they hear nothing about the cleansing of the temple. Wimps don't act that way. They live and let live. They hear nothing about Christ's condemnation of the actions of Pharisees. No whitewashed tombs here. Nary a cross word comes from a wimp. They hear something about sins they probably don't find attractive anyway, such as death, murder, and racism. But they aren't told Jesus is annoyed by the sins they like. Such are using artificial birth control, fornicating, and getting drunk. Jesus is presented as an indulgent brother, never as the stern judge of the last judgment. He comes across as a good listener, but never as one who would say, "Go, and now sin no more." Can they be blamed for not finding him very attractive? Not only doesn't he come across as a god one can take seriously, he often doesn't even seem to be much a man. So, when these Catholics finally realize that sin is real and necessitates repentance, that Jesus is God and needs to be treated as such, they discover that Jesus is unlike the Jesus they've been hearing about in homilies at Sunday Mass, and they jump ship, leaving the bark of Peter. Don't be too hard on them. After all, how many of us listening to Cho's sentimental homilies over the years ever took our priests aside and suggested it was time the congregation graduated from spiritual papillon to the solid meat of the Gospels? And don't be too hard on the priests either. Many homiletic experts told them, if not in so many words, to avoid the hard sayings, to emphasize that I have a friend in Jesus approach, to say nothing at which someone might take offense. Shouldn't the experts know what's needed? They thought. We all could have done more long ago. We know that now that we're seeing a quiet exodus from the pews, especially on the part of our young people. And it is quiet. Few people who leave the Catholic Church for another make a fuss about it. They just go, though often they return to their precincts long enough to convince their friends and relatives to go with them. It seems the fuss comes from people who have lost their faith but, for quasi-political reasons, insist on staying in the church and attempt to run it. They refuse to follow the logic of their principles, while the new Bible Christians insist on following theirs, so live Catholicism. What to do? We should insist on the complete acceptance of reality. As Frank Sheed put it, we should insist on sanity. A man is insane if he doesn't accept reality as it is. One facet, the main facet, of reality is God as He is. To know Him more perfectly is to know reality more perfectly. And God is not a wimp. To the extent we allow ourselves to succumb to the notion that He is, we fail to accept reality. We are less than fully sane. We can begin by opening the Gospels and seeing again what Jesus was really like is really like. Fulton Sheen's Romano Guardinis or some other, we can learn that the Jesus of the Gospels, the Jesus we worship, is not the Jesus of a Franco Severelli. Then we can speak with our priest about all this, telling them that a cautious self-censoring is precisely what is not needed in their homilies right now. Edmund Burke astutely noted that as internal restraint lessens within a society, external restraint, meaning laws and punishments, must increase to compensate. The reverse is true also. The more internal restraint, the fewer laws. You can afford the luxury of few laws when people can police themselves. You can't when they can't wait. It's much the same in talking about the faith. You can afford to talk sweetness and light when the folks on the pews have a solid grasp of God. But when they see God as a wimp, such an approach only confirms them in their mis-apprehensions. They need to obtain balanced understandings, which can only come through preaching the whole life of Christ, the whole of the faith. If that's done, Catholics who convert as adults, meaning nominal Catholics who finally realize the implication of Christianity, won't be tempted to leave the church because they know the real Jesus has been taught to them all along.